You know, revolutions don't just happen. They're not these spontaneous sparks that just suddenly ignite a whole nation. No, they're organized, they're built, piece by painstaking piece. So today, let's dive into the story of the incredible underground network that really laid the groundwork for American independence.
This quote right here, from Samuel Adams way back in 1764, it just perfectly captures the whole mood. You can feel the tension, right? For the American colonists, this wasn't just about paying a little extra money for stamps or sugar. It was about their identity. Were they freeborn Englishmen and women, or were they becoming, as Adams put it, tributary slaves? That was the question that was going to define everything.
And right at the center of this growing storm was one man, Samuel Adams, a guy with a really powerful and actually pretty simple idea. He knew that to fight an empire, you first had to connect the continent. So the trouble really starts to heat up in the 1760s. Britain had just fought the long and very expensive French and Indian War, and now they needed to pay for it. So Parliament starts passing these new taxes, the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, directly on the colonies. And for a lot of colonists, this felt like a huge betrayal. It felt like a violation of their rights. People were getting angry, but that anger was scattered, It was disorganized.
And this is where Samuel Adams really steps onto the stage. Now, this guy wasn't your typical politician. People who knew him described him as being borderline obsessed with government. He was an incredible writer, a master of propaganda, and he had this core belief that he'd held since his days at Harvard, that it's not just your right, but your duty to resist a tyrannical ruler to save your country. So Adams looked around and saw the problem. All these colonies, Virginia, Massachusetts, New York, they were all angry about the same things, but they were isolated. They were dealing with London on their own. His solution? An underground network of communication. A formal system for the leaders in all 13 colonies to share news, coordinate their plans, and finally, act as one. It sounds so simple, but at the time, it was absolutely revolutionary.
Honestly, the best way to think about what Samuel Adams created is as America's very first social network. It wasn't built with code and servers, of course. It was built with paper, ink, and a shared sense of purpose.
And they were called the Committees of Correspondence. The name is a little formal, but their job was super clear. Get a bunch of patriot leaders in a room and have them start writing letters. Their whole goal was to create a united front against whatever Parliament was throwing at them.
And the system itself was genius in its simplicity. Okay, so step one, your committee in, say, Boston, sees the British do something shady, like seize a ship without a proper trial. Step two, they immediately get to work, writing letters and pamphlets detailing exactly what went down. Step three, they give those letters to couriers, guys on horseback or on ships who just take off. And step four, that news spreads like wildfire, from the big port cities to the smallest towns out in the countryside. And this idea, well, it absolutely took off. It went viral, 18th century style. Boston got the first permanent committee going in 1772. By the start of 1774, just a little over a year later, 11 of the 13 colonies had official committees up and running. The network was live.
But look, a network is only as strong as what it can actually do, right? This brand new information superhighway was about to get its first big test. It was time to see if all those words could be turned into real coordinated action.
And that test came in 1773 with something called the Tea Act. Now here's the funny thing. This law actually made tea cheaper for the colonists. So you might be thinking, what's the big deal? Well, the problem was that it gave the British East India Company a total monopoly. It was designed to crush the local colonial merchants and smugglers, powerful guys like John Hancock, and it was seen as just one more way for Parliament to prove they could tax and control the colonies however they wanted.
On the night of December 16, 1773, the colonists sent their reply, and that reply came in the form of a number, 342. That's how many chests of British tea got dumped straight into Boston Harbor.
And I want you to understand, this wasn't some chaotic, drunken riot. The Boston Tea Party was a planned, disciplined, almost military-style operation. It was carried out by the Sons of Liberty, who were the muscle of this new patriot network. They boarded 3 ships, and over a few hours, they systematically destroyed every last chest of tea. I mean, they were so organized that they even replaced a padlock on one of the ships that they had accidentally broken.
So, what did the architect of this whole network think? Well, Samuel Adams was absolutely thrilled. He wrote this to a friend, just talking about the pure joy he was seeing on the streets of Boston. For him, this was it. This was proof that a united colonial front could actually work. But not everyone in Boston was celebrating. And this is really important to remember. The revolution wasn't just colonists versus the British. It was also colonist versus colonist. And the patriots had a major opponent right there in their own city. You can really see this massive divide in Massachusetts by looking at these two men. On one side, you have Samuel Adams, the master organizer, who sees resistance as the only path. And on the other, you have Governor Thomas Hutchinson. He's the last royal governor, and he's a loyalist. He truly believes that the only way to have peace and prosperity is to submit to the authority of Parliament. So while Adams is building his network to defy Britain, Hutchinson is secretly writing letters to Britain, reporting on everything the Patriots are doing. And then, things got really ugly. Someone leaked Hutchinson's private letters, and they got published for everyone to read. It was a massive scandal. The Patriots jumped all over it, saying, "See, here's the proof. The governor is actively trying to destroy our freedoms." It was like pouring gasoline on a fire. Hutchinson became maybe the most hated man in all of Massachusetts. Now, Hutchinson, of course, was furious about the Tea Party. He called it treason. And back in London, Parliament agreed with him. But their response would end up doing more to unite the colonies than even Samuel Adams could have ever hoped for. Britain's reaction was fast, and it was harsh. They decided they were going to make an example out of Boston, so Parliament passed a series of laws that they called the Coercive Acts. But in America, they were known by a much different name, the Intolerable Acts.
And they were called intolerable for a reason. First, they completely closed the port of Boston until the tea was paid for, which basically killed the city's economy. Then they took away Massachusetts' charter and said that town meetings could only happen once a year. And to top it all off, a new quartering act meant that all the colonies might have to house British troops. By trying to isolate and punish Massachusetts, Parliament had made every single colony feel threatened.
You can literally draw a straight line from one event to the next. The Boston Tea Party leads directly to the Intolerable Acts, and the Intolerable Acts are the final straw. The committees of correspondence go into overdrive, using that network they built to organize a massive colonies-wide meeting. And in September of 1774, delegates from all over gathered in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. And that's the real legacy here. The committees of correspondence did so much more than just coordinate a few protests. By creating a way for the colonies to talk to each other and act together, they built the actual framework for what would become the government of a new nation. They were, in effect, a shadow government just waiting for its moment. It's pretty amazing to think about. We live in a world where we can send a message around the globe in a split second. So what can we learn from a revolution that was built slowly, deliberately, one handwritten letter and one horsebound courier at a time? It's definitely something worth thinking about.